Have you ever felt trapped in a battle with no way out? Overdue bills, a crumbling relationship, or some invisible pressure suffocating you? But what if I told you that right now, in this very room, there's a powerful army protecting you, invisible to the naked eye? The difference between despair and victory lies in the blink of an eye, not in the eyes on your face, but in the eyes of your soul. Before we delve into this secret, I want to ask you a sincere question. Right now, how are you feeling? Are you feeling peaceful? Or are you entering this place with a heavy heart, burdened by the armies of pressure surrounding your life? Pause for a moment. Take a deep breath, because what you are about to hear may be the key you have been searching for all along. Elisha and the army of fire. Imagine an early morning in the city of Dothan. The servant of the prophet Elisha steps out onto the balcony, stretching to greet the dawn. But instead of a peaceful morning, what he sees is the cold steel gleam of thousands of swords and spears. The Aram army, a powerful empire, has surrounded the entire city to capture only one person, Elisha. He runs back inside, breathless, his face, his heart drained of all color. "Sir, we're doomed. The enemy is everywhere. What shall we do?" But what about Elisha? He didn't even bother to rise from his chair. He smiled and said something that astonished the servant. "Don't be afraid. We outnumber them." Remember this detail. The servant counted the soldiers using mathematical logic, while Elisha saw the world through the reality of heaven. Elisha simply prayed, "Lord, open his eyes." Immediately, the fog of physical reality dissipated. The servant was astonished to see that on the surrounding hills, it wasn't just the Aramean army, but tens of thousands of chariots of blazing fire. The army of God was encircling the enemy. This was the first sign. God doesn't change your circumstances first. He changes your bandwidth of perception. The profound truth is, the enemy remains. The threat remains. But when spiritual vision opens, fear is completely eradicated. Complete. Spiritual vision is not some kind of illusion to escape reality, but the ability to see through the veneer of difficulty, to see eternal protection. When you begin to see what God sees, you will stop reacting with panic and begin to respond with triumph. Have you ever wondered why the most successful and talented people sometimes stumble in such inexplicable ways? Why does someone who has it all suddenly lose everything overnight? The truth is, the most formidable enemy is not outside, but in the blindness that creeps within us. When you stop seeing with the eyes of your soul, your strength is no longer a weapon. It becomes a trap. Let's explore the second sign, a warning from the past that could save your future today. Pause for a moment. Have you ever made a decision that seemed perfectly logical at the time, but later, looking back, you wonder, why was I so blind then? Don't worry, you're not alone. That feeling of regret is actually a sign that God is trying to restore your sight. Are you ready to face this truth? Now, Samson. The tragedy of blind power. Samson is a legend. He wasn't just strong. He possessed supernatural strength. He could tear apart a lion with his bare hands, single-handedly defeat thousands of enemies. But Samson had a fatal flaw. He lived by instinctive vision, not spiritual vision. All of Samson's mistakes began with the phrase, "I see a woman." He chose Delilah not because she was good for his mission, but because she was beautiful, according to the standards of the senses. The video analyzes deeply that Samson didn't lose his strength overnight. He lost it through small compromises, through ignoring the warning voice within. The climax of the tragedy was when the Philistines captured him. Their first action wasn't to kill him, but to gouge out his eyes. Why? Because the enemy knew that a strong man without vision is just a harmless giant circling a millstone. Samson only truly saw God again when he was completely immersed in the darkness of his prison. This is the second sign. Spiritual blindness is often directly proportional to pride, and when you begin to believe that your success is due to personal talent, when you prioritize fleeting emotions over divine guidance, that's when your spiritual vision is closing. More profoundly, the story of Samson teaches us that God sometimes allows us to stumble. This forces us to look up. Samson's physical blindness in prison was the beginning of his spiritual awakening. If you are feeling lost or in darkness, it may not be punishment, but rather a spiritual surgery to help you see what truly matters. If your life is currently a mess, if you feel like you're drowning in mud and can't see a way out, then stop for a moment. Maybe you're not abandoned at all. What if I said, sometimes God has to use mud to heal our blindness? That the darkness you're experiencing isn't the end, but a miraculous process of regeneration so you can see something greater. Let's move on to the third sign, where miracles begin from the dirtiest things. And I want to ask you a question. Have you ever felt resentful of God for making your life so complicated? You expected a brilliant miracle, but reality was only filled with unpleasant things. Are you willing to set aside your ego to accept a not-so-pleasant remedy, as long as it helps you see the light? The miracle from mud and water. Look at the story of the man born blind in John chapter 9. This was a man who had never known light. Instead of just uttering a powerful word, Jesus did something extremely strange. He spat on the ground, mixed it with mud, and applied it to the man's eyes. Imagine the blind man's feeling at that moment. Not only could he not see, but now he had dirty mud smeared on his face. It was unpleasant, even somewhat offensive. But God didn't stop there. He said, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam." He had to grope his way along with mud-covered eyes, possibly ridiculed by others, until he touched the water and washed it clean. That was when the world shone brightly before him for the first time in his life. This third sign carries an extremely profound message. The path to new vision often begins with discomfort and irrationality. Reconstruction. Mud is a combination of dust, human essence, and the Creator's saliva. This is an image of new creation. God is reshaping your perception from the very fragments of life. Healing doesn't happen immediately with the application of mud. It happens when the blind man obediently walks while still unable to see. Spiritual vision is not a reward for those who wait for clarity, but a reward for those who dare to walk in obscurity according to His guidance. If you are feeling your life is dirty, despite the mud and the numerous unreasonable demands from adversity, remember, the mud is God's remedy, and obedience is the cleansing water that opens the eyes. What if I told you that those who believe they see best are often the most blind? There is a kind of darkness that doesn't come from a lack of knowledge, but from having too much knowledge without humility. You may know every rule by heart, attend Mass every day, but still completely miss the presence of God right before your eyes. Let's dissect the fourth sign, a stark warning about the most terrifying kind of blindness, the blindness of those who think they already see. Let's be honest with ourselves. Have you ever used your knowledge to judge others or to prove that you're always right? The feeling of "I know it all" is sometimes the thickest wall separating us from the truth. Are you ready for God to shatter your old prejudices to receive a fresher perspective? The masters of knowledge, but spiritually blind. Returning to the story of the blind man being healed, but this time the focus is on the Pharisees, the most learned religious scholars of the time. They had everything: degrees, status, and knowledge of the law. But when the blind man stood there, cheering because he saw the light for the first time, these masters were not happy at all. Instead of being amazed by the miracle, they began to scrutinize. Why heal on the Sabbath? Why doesn't this person follow our proper procedure? They saw a violation, but were blind to a son. They were so preoccupied with protecting their own system of knowledge that they rejected the one who created it. Jesus left behind a bitter observation. If you were blind, you would not be guilty, but because you say, "We see," your sin remains. This fourth sign is a profound warning. Knowledge without submission is merely pride in disguise. The trap of complacency. When we believe we possess the entire truth, we inadvertently close the door to the new things God wants to reveal. Spiritual vision doesn't require a brain overflowing with information. It requires a heart overflowing with longing. The man born blind knew nothing of theology. He knew only one thing: I was blind, and now I see. That is the true power of spiritual vision. It doesn't need polished arguments. It needs life-changing experiences. If you find yourself beginning to judge less, debating less right and wrong, and instead becoming amazed by simple daily graces, that is when your spiritual eyes are truly opening. Have you ever felt like you're exiled in your own life? You feel lonely, you feel like you've messed everything up, and God seems millions of miles away? But listen, perhaps that very desert is where God has laid a ladder leading straight down from heaven to where you are. Don't confuse loneliness with His absence. Let's move on to the fifth sign, how God awakens your vision in the most unexpected places. Look back at your worst moments. Have you ever found yourself hitting rock bottom, but then felt a strange power lift you up? Sometimes we become complacent in our success and only truly awaken when we have nothing left to cling to but God. Are you in such a dark night of the soul? Jacob and the ladder in the wilderness. Look at Jacob in Genesis chapter 28. He wasn't on a pilgrimage, he was on the run. After deceiving his father and brother, Jacob fled into the desert, consumed by guilt, fear, and destitution. That night, he used a rock as a pillow and fell asleep in the deserted wilderness. In his sleep as a fugitive, Jacob saw an astonishing vision. A ladder was placed on the ground, its top reaching to the sky, and the angels of God were ascending and descending above it. There, God stood on high and promised to be with him. When Jacob awoke, he uttered a statement that changed spiritual history. Surely God was here, and I did not know it. He transformed the stone that served as his pillow into an altar. The place that was once a symbol of harshness, the stone, became the gateway to heaven, thanks to his awakened spiritual vision. This fifth sign carries an extremely powerful message about awakening in the desert. God meets you in error. Jacob did not see the vision while in the temple or doing good works. He met him right in the midst of the ruins he himself had created. This teaches us that spiritual vision does not require you to be perfect to begin. It requires you to recognize that you need God. The ladder was not built while Jacob slept. It was already there. Jacob's blindness was not the absence of God, but a lack of awareness. Spiritual vision is the ability to recognize that the supernatural and the natural world are different. We are always connected, and every place you go can be holy ground if you are vigilant. If you begin to see God's presence in your loneliest moments, in your bitterest failures, that is the clearest sign that He is preparing you for a greater mission. Have you ever prayed earnestly for God to lift a burden, but nothing seemed to change? You remained standing there, and difficulties surrounded you like a powerless army. But listen, perhaps the greatest miracle isn't making the enemy disappear, but dissolving your fear with a new perspective. Let's move on to the sixth sign, the secret of unshakable peace. When God doesn't change what you see, He changes how you see it. I want to ask you a very practical question. If you wake up tomorrow with your difficulties still there, but your soul is filled with confidence and peace, is that enough for you? Sometimes we are so obsessed with escaping trouble that we forget that God wants us to overcome it. Are you ready to receive a vision that can see through the walls of anxiety? Don't change the circumstances, change the perspective. We return to Elisha in Dothan, but this time let's focus on a crucial detail. After the servant saw the army of fire, did the Aram army retreat? Not at all. They still besieged the city, still fierce and threatening. The only difference is the servant's reaction. Before, he saw the Aramean army and saw death. Then he looked at the Aramean army and saw an opportunity for God to show His power. Elisha taught his servant a lesson about spiritual orientation. When you know you are surrounded by the resources of heaven, the number of enemies on earth becomes meaningless. The miracle is not in the disappearance of the enemies, but in their inability to threaten your soul. This sixth sign reveals a golden principle of spiritual maturity. A new vision redefines reality. Invisible certainty. Spiritual vision is not a naive optimism or a denial of reality. It is certainty based on what eyes have not seen, ears have not heard. As St. Paul said, we do not look at visible things, for they are temporary, but at invisible things, for they are eternal. The power of serenity. When you have this vision, you no longer waste energy running. You run away. You stand firm. Your peace becomes a weapon that strikes fear into your enemies. You realize that you are not fighting to win, but fighting from the position of the victor. If you find yourself stopping complaining about difficulties and beginning to seek God's hand in those very difficulties, then congratulations. Your eyes have truly opened to a higher level. Are you facing something that is completely shattered? A dead dream? A marriage that has grown cold? Or a soul as hardened as stone? When all hope seems buried, the world will tell you, give up. But God asks you a different question. Can these broken pieces come back to life? Let's move on to the final and most explosive sign, where spiritual vision is not just for observation, but for activating life from the brink of death. Look at the valley of your life right now. Is there anything you've labeled hopeless or too late? Sometimes God takes you to the darkest place, not to bury you, but to teach you how to use faith to call life back. Do you have the courage to look through death and see the resurrection that awaits? The prophet Ezekiel and the valley of dry bones. Imagine the prophet Ezekiel being led to the middle of a vast valley. But this is not a lush, green valley, but an open graveyard filled with dry, weathered skeletons. No life, no hope, only the remnants of failure. God asks him, "Son of man, can these bones come to life?" If viewed with the naked eye, the answer would surely be no. But Ezekiel opened his spiritual vision and replied, "Lord, only you know." And then a miracle happened. God didn't tell Ezekiel to stand and watch. He told him to speak to the bones. When he spoke, the bones began to tremble, reconnecting, tendons and flesh covering them. And finally, the breath of God breathed into them, transforming them into an incredibly powerful army. This is the seventh sign, the highest level of spiritual vision. The ability to see the potential for life in destruction. Active faith. This vision doesn't stop at seeing, but leads to action. Ezekiel had to participate in the restoration process by speaking words of faith. When you have spiritual vision, you don't just lament the situation. You begin to proclaim God's promises upon that situation. So, God didn't just make the bones move, He transformed them into an army. This teaches us that when God opens your eyes to see the restoration, He will not merely mend what is lost. He will make it stronger and greater than it was in the beginning. This final sign is proof that if you still see opportunity, even when everyone says it's over, if you feel an urge to pray for what is dead, that is when God is using His inner vision to prepare for a great revival. The journey through these 7 signs is not just about accumulating knowledge, but an invitation to step out of the darkness of anxiety. You see, spiritual vision is not something distant reserved for saints. It is a gift that God is ready to give you right now. Among the chaos, in the valley of dry bones, or even when you feel most covered in mud. Remember, when God opens your eyes, the world around you may remain the same, but the person within you is completely different. You are no longer a victim of circumstances, but a companion to the Creator, writing brilliant new chapters in your life. Before we part ways today, I have a question for your heart. Of the 7 signs we have just analyzed, which one resonated with you the most? Are you feeling strong but blind like Samson? Or are you standing in a valley of bones and needing faith to proclaim life? Don't keep it to yourself. Share your story or feelings in the comments below. Each of your thoughts is not only a way to affirm your faith, but also an inspiration for other brothers and sisters walking this journey with you. If this video has given you a new ray of light for the journey ahead, please help us spread that light by liking this video so the algorithm knows this is a valuable message, subscribing to the channel, and turning on notifications so you don't miss any more spiritual enlightenment journeys. If you feel at peace, leave a comment, "Lord, open my eyes," as an affirmation of your faith. Thank you for accompanying us until these final moments. Wishing you a day filled with mindfulness and fresh heavenly insights. See you on your next journey.